I see a lot of creators, instead of looking internally maybe at like what has staying power with me as an individual, what do I actually like that I could show up for 1,000 times and have a good time doing and make it really good. You're kind of looking around for other people to be examples for you. Is that something, does that feel accurate to like mimetic desire? Does that feel like something you notice?
Yes. And, and I think people are sort of standing around looking for the right models often. And even if we embark on a project, we often like look to have it validated right away.
Right.
And if nobody else validates it, then we begin to doubt that we made the right decision. And sadly, the same is even true with relationships. I mean, like in high school, like you have somebody, that, I don't know, ask somebody to prom or something like that. And like the first thing that they want to do is like get validation, or they're dating. And it's like, oh, like if none of my, friends like sort of like bless this thing, then maybe I asked the wrong person. I don't know. Like we're scared to have desires that nobody else has. It seems like, and that's an interesting thing to just sort of be aware of, as to like what extent do I need to have this thing validated by other people? And, one way I think that an interesting framework to help sort of check ourselves a little bit. Have you ever heard of that sort of Japanese framework or Venn diagram called the Ikigai?
I have. Yeah. I don't know it intimately, but I've like skimmed the idea before.
Yeah. So there's an interesting Venn diagram, and it's sort of like, you sort of want to look at the intersection of what the world needs, like what is an actual problem? What can you be paid for? Because that is important. That is a factor, right? What are you good at? Like, what are you actually good at? And then what do you love? Right. And like when these four sort of things like come together, you have something, right? You have something that has like all of the different ingredients baked in, to probably be something that will last and can be enduring. If one of those is missing, things get a little bit tricky, right? And I think that sort of layered way of looking at the things that we're doing can save us a lot of problems, where if we're only looking at things from one layer, right? It's just doing what I love. Well, maybe I could never get paid for it, right? It might be a problem, right? I think that's one of the many sort of solutions to just checking ourselves in terms of some of the things that we're doing. Because I mean, one of the reasons that I wrote the book is that I'm trying to save people from, these cycles of passion followed by disillusionment. And I describe in the intro to the book, the sort of the shallowness of my passion for one of my companies was just put on display for me when a deal that I had to sell the company sort of fell through. And rather than be disappointed, I was relieved. And I was like, well, that's like, doesn't seem like the way that I should feel.
Right.
Why do I feel that way? And that's really the thing that set me down the road to discovering Girard. And, I had people say, well, that relief maybe is actually some sense of freedom that you feel for not chasing the next sort of mimetic model that you find. Maybe you need to take some time away. And that feeling of relief from having a deal fall through, I realized was freedom that I could now sort of reset and reevaluate and purge some of the sort of unhealthy mimetic models that I had in my life, right? I was surrounded by highly sort of, not that there's anything wrong with this, but like, highly ambitious, hungry entrepreneurs that seem to be starting companies every single year. And were sharing their cap tables with everybody and fundraising, and there was like information overload. And I realized that I needed to unplug from that for a while because I wasn't, I didn't have enough self-possession to be in that environment at that time in my life without feeling like a compass that was having its needle like basically just like going like this at all times, right? And if you know the way that a compass works, it should point north, but it only points north if you're holding it flat, for one thing, right? And for me, that represents like some stability, right? You need to hold it flat in your hands. And it also like can't have any things that would give it a false north next to it, right? So if I had a compass and it was right here in my hand next to my microphone and my laptop, I would get a false north, right? Because of the magnetic, there are things in my computer that would cause the needle to give a false north, right? And that's how I think desire works too. Right. I think like we sometimes need to unplug from the environments where we can get false norths.
Wow.
And
they're everywhere.
And they're everywhere. Right.
Yeah.
And at least see what a true north reading looks like. And then identify the things and then you can go back into those environments, but at least now you don't believe the compass every time you look at it. Like now, at least, you know that there are all kinds of things that can give it false readings and that you might need to reset in order to get the true reading. And I start every semester, and in the class that I teach, we talk about this. And it's crazy. I mean, it's 2022, but I have, a compass that I bring with me into the classroom. And I'm always like, does anybody know how one of these things works? And I usually get one or two students that were like Eagle Scouts or something like that. And I'm like, I'm not calling on you guys, right? Does anybody else know how one of these things works? And I pass it around and I say, well, which direction is north? And, nobody knows how the thing works, right? And then we sort of explain it. And for me, it's a really good analogy for mimetic desire.